What's the most dramatic thing happening in your life right now? From the moment I moved into my husband's house, I could sense the hostility from my stepdaughter. She seemed to despise me for no reason at all. One incident that stands out was when she asked me for $120 to go to the hair salon. I refused, and she didn't take it well. A week later, I discovered that she had gone through my wallet and stolen the money. That was the final straw for me. I told my husband I couldn't stand by and watch him enable her any longer. I reminded him that she's 22 years old, doesn't pay rent, doesn't work, and isn't even attending college. When he tried to interrupt and defend her, I brought up the hair salon incident. The worst part was that when he found out about the theft, he didn't even confront her. His silence spoke volumes, and that's when I gave him an ultimatum. Either she leaves the house or we're getting a divorce. He looked at me and simply said, "I can't kick my daughter out. I'm sorry." Then he walked out. I was in shock. I loved my husband deeply, and the ultimatum was something I wasn't truly ready to commit to. I just wanted to have a serious conversation with him about our situation. Benjamin and I had countless arguments about it afterward. He kept insisting that Lisa was young and needed time to figure things out, but it was clear to me that she wasn't even trying. Lisa had always been spoiled. When I first met her, she was just 15 and living with her mother. Benjamin and I had just started dating, and I wanted to make a good impression. During our first meeting, she demanded a new iPhone from him because her current one was outdated and all her friends had the latest model. Benjamin laughed it off, but I saw the pattern early on. She always got what she wanted. Her mother indulged her every whim, never questioning her demands. As the years went by, Lisa's expectations only grew. She believed everything should be handed to her on a silver platter. In high school, she refused to get a part-time job, claiming that studying was her job. But her grades never reflected that. She spent more time shopping and hanging out with friends than hitting the books. Her mother and Benjamin always made excuses for her, saying she was just finding herself. And now, here we are. It was becoming clear that Lisa was more than comfortable living off her father and me. The days following my ultimatum were unbearable. Lisa found out about the conversation I had with her dad and the ultimatum I gave him. From that moment on, she made it her mission to make my life miserable, slamming doors, making snide comments, and going out of her way to create chaos. Benjamin tried to mediate, but it was obvious he was struggling to keep the peace. One day, after a long and exhausting day at work, I walked into the house and was immediately greeted by the blaring sound of loud music coming from the living room. It was Lisa's doing. I politely asked her to turn it down, but she ignored me, keeping the volume obnoxiously high. I walked into the living room and found her lounging on the couch, surrounded by snacks and empty soda cans, her attention glued to her phone. I asked her again to lower the volume, and she finally looked up with a smirk, apologizing insincerely and claiming she didn't hear me. She took her sweet time grabbing the remote and turned the volume down just a notch. The music was still deafening, but I let it go and headed to the kitchen to start dinner. When I entered the kitchen, my frustration grew. The sink was overflowing with dirty dishes, and the countertops were covered in crumbs. I called Lisa into the kitchen and asked why she hadn't cleaned up after herself. She casually responded that she was planning to do it later. My patience was wearing thin. I reminded her that I had asked her that morning to clean up before I got home, but instead of apologizing, she retorted that if I weren't so uptight all the time, things would be easier around here. That was it. I lost my temper. I told her that it wasn't just about the dishes. I wanted a clean home and, more importantly, respect. I accused her of being selfish, caring only about herself. In response, she screamed back at me, accusing me of thinking I was perfect and calling me controlling. Then she hit me with a low blow, saying, "Maybe that's why Dad doesn't really love you." She added that if he truly loved me, he would have chosen me over her when I gave him the ultimatum. But because he didn't, it was clear that she had his real love. That evening, when Benjamin got home, I didn't waste any time. I immediately handed him divorce papers. When Benjamin saw the divorce papers, his face fell, and his eyes filled with tears. He begged me not to go through with it, but I stood firm. I reminded him that I had given both him and Lisa multiple chances, and the disrespect I endured that day was the final straw. I told him that the only way I could stay was if he chose me over Lisa. It took him a moment to realize how serious I was, and the thought of losing me forever seemed to hit him hard. Reluctantly, he told Lisa she had to leave. The conversation was tense, and I could see how much it hurt him to say those words. But just when I thought the nightmare was ending, Lisa refused to go. She claimed she had nowhere else to stay, but I held my ground. I gave Benjamin a week to decide. Either she leaves or I do. That week was agonizing. It was painful to watch Benjamin, torn between his love for me and his responsibility to his daughter. It hurt to see him struggle with the decision, but deep down, I knew what needed to be done. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Benjamin made his choice. He told Lisa she had to leave. She stormed out, but not before threatening us, saying we would regret ever kicking her out. I felt a mixture of relief and guilt, knowing that while Lisa's departure might bring some peace, it was only the beginning of new chaos. Within days, I started hearing rumors, ugly rumors that Benjamin was having an affair with a coworker. The gossip spread quickly, and it wasn't long before it reached me. My heart sank when I confronted Benjamin about it. The thought of him betraying me like that was unbearable. As soon as he got home from work, I asked him if it was true, my voice trembling with fear and doubt. He seemed genuinely hurt that I would even question his fidelity. I could see the pain in his eyes as he reassured me that he would never do that to me. He insisted that the rumors were nothing but lies. To prove his innocence, he showed me his phone, and sure enough, the messages between him and his coworker were strictly business. He even reminded me that the nights in question, he had been with no one but me. I sat there feeling utterly humiliated, even after Benjamin had proven his innocence. The damage was done. The trust between us felt shattered. Benjamin's words cut deep when he said that if I could believe those lies, maybe our marriage wouldn't survive. I was left feeling more alone than ever, but despite everything, I chose to stay. I wanted to rebuild our relationship because I still loved him and couldn't imagine being with anyone else. But just a few weeks later, I came home to a nightmare. I found Lisa back in the house. Benjamin told me she had promised to change and that he couldn't turn her away. I felt an overwhelming sense of betrayal. She had wormed her way back in, and I could see her trying to drive a wedge between us. It was clear she had him wrapped around her finger, and I didn't know how much longer I could endure this cycle of manipulation. The final straw came when I discovered that Lisa was spreading more lies, this time about me. One day, as I walked to my mailbox, I saw my neighbor, a sweet old lady who usually greeted me with a smile. But this time, when I waved at her, she just looked back at me, shook her head, and quickly went back inside. It was strange behavior, but I initially dismissed it, thinking she might be going through something. However, the same cold interactions continued over the next few days. Finally, I decided to visit her to find out what was going on. When she opened the door, the look of disappointment on her face was undeniable. I asked her why she had been so distant lately, and her response left me stunned. She said she knew what I had done. Confused, I asked her what she meant, insisting that I hadn't done anything wrong. She lowered her voice and told me she knew I had been stealing people's money orders from their mailboxes around the neighborhood. Shocked, I asked her who had told her such a thing, and her answer didn't surprise me: Lisa. She had been spreading these vicious rumors about me to the entire neighborhood, and now no one trusted me. I was seething. I tried to explain to my neighbor what was really going on, that Lisa's lies were just retaliation for being forced to find a new place to live. She seemed to halfway believe me, but as I walked away, my blood boiled. Lisa wasn't just causing problems in my home, she was spreading her poison outside of it too. She told anyone who would listen that I was the villain, painting herself as the victim. I felt trapped, unsupported, and utterly defeated. That's when I knew I had to leave, for my own sanity. I proceeded with the divorce. My heart broke as I walked away from the life I had built with Benjamin, watching our marriage crumble. He was torn between his love for me and his duty as a father, and I knew I couldn't compete with that. Leaving was the hardest thing I'd ever done, but I knew it was the right choice. I left feeling a mix of relief and sadness. Starting a new life was intimidating, but I chose peace over chaos. As I adjusted to my new life, I could see from a distance that Benjamin and Lisa continued their destructive dance. She still had him wrapped around her finger, and I watched as his life began to spiral out of control. I was just grateful I had left before it was too late. The first few weeks of my new life were tough. The whole situation had taken a toll on my mental health, but I was determined to rebuild. I rented a small apartment on the other side of town, and every evening I'd sit on my tiny balcony, sipping tea and watching the sunset. This new routine brought me a sense of calm, but the nights were the hardest. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything that had happened: the hurt, the betrayal, and the overwhelming sense of loss. To distract myself from the pain, I threw myself into my work. My colleagues noticed the change in me, but I kept my personal life private. Slowly, I began to rebuild my confidence, finding strength in the small victories of each day. Meanwhile, life for Benjamin and Lisa was far from perfect. The rumors Lisa had spread about Benjamin's supposed affair continued to circulate, causing tension at his workplace. His co-workers were cautious around him, unsure of what to believe. It was clear that the lies and deceit were taking their toll on him too. Benjamin found himself increasingly isolated, struggling to maintain his professional relationships. At home, things were even worse. Lisa's promises to change had been nothing but empty words. She continued her entitled behavior, expecting Benjamin to cater to her every whim. She refused to look for a job and spent her days lounging around the house or out with friends. The strain of living with Lisa was taking its toll on Benjamin, and he was finally beginning to see the impact of his choices. I knew all of this because one evening, Benjamin reached out to me. He asked if we could meet for coffee, saying he needed to talk. I agreed, and we met at a small cafe. When I saw him, his eyes looked tired, and there was a weariness about him that I hadn't seen before. He began apologizing, saying he finally understood what I had been trying to tell him all along. He admitted that he should have listened to me. By this point, our divorce was final, and I knew that Lisa still had a hold on him. I told him it was too late for us, that when I needed him to stand by me, he didn't. He confessed that he needed help and was actively trying to change things with Lisa, saying he was tired of enabling her. As we talked, I realized that although I still cared for Benjamin, our relationship was beyond repair. I had to focus on my own healing and build a life that I could enjoy without the constant drama and pain. Weeks turned into months, and I continued to rebuild my life. I made new friends and surrounded myself with people who brought positivity and joy into my world. A few years later, I heard a knock on my front door. When I looked through the peephole, I was surprised to see Lisa. She looked different, more disheveled than I had ever seen her. When I opened the door, she hesitated before telling me she needed my help and that she was in trouble. I was taken aback. After everything she had done, I wasn't sure I wanted to help her. But there was a part of me that remembered the young girl who had been caught in the middle of her parents' divorce, who had never been taught to take responsibility for her actions. She explained that she had gotten involved with the wrong crowd and was now deep in debt. This time, Benjamin had refused to bail her out, insisting that she needed to learn from her mistakes. She was scared and didn't know where else to turn. Despite everything that had happened between us, I decided to help her, but only on my terms. I told her that I would help, but she had to make some real changes. The days of empty promises were over. She needed to find a job, start contributing to her own life, and stop relying on others to fix her problems. Lisa nodded, saying she'd do anything to turn things around. I helped her pay off her debt and connected her with a job opportunity through one of my friends. It wasn't easy, but over time, Lisa began to change. She found a job, started paying rent, and even enrolled in classes to finish her degree. Slowly, she was starting to take responsibility for her life. Meanwhile, Benjamin and I maintained a cordial relationship, but we both knew that our time together had passed. He focused on repairing his relationship with Lisa, while I continued to build my new life. Looking back, I realized that the journey had been painful, but it had also been necessary. I had learned to stand up for myself, prioritize my well-being, and let go of relationships that no longer served me. The emotional scars are still there, but I'm stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace whatever the future holds.